Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today is the final show before Wolves Nuggets second round series tips off. I want to talk final takeaways, keys to the series, also some bold predictions, who will win and how many games. It's all coming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. And we are, depending on when you're listening to this, probably just over 24 hours from game one of Wolves Nuggets in Denver on Saturday. That game time was announced at 6 p.m. Central with no game sevens at all. Two potential game sevens still Sunday in the league, but none on Saturday. So the Wolves are the only show in town in terms of the NBA landscape on Saturday. So today's the preview show. Lots of stuff to talk about. I'm going to kind of summarize what we did Wednesday and Thursday on the show with my biggest keys and takeaways. Also make a couple of bold predictions as I did in round one. We can also kind of revisit how those bold predictions looked. Just because, I don't know, accountability for myself, right? And then also my prediction on the Wolves Nuggets series. So all that's upcoming today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. A reminder about the postcast show as we're back into games here tomorrow. Not only do we cover your team every day right here on Locked On Wolves, we also give you instant episodes after every single game. Check out the Locked On Wolves postcast right here on the Locked On Wolves podcast feed. You catch the audio here after the games, but we also stream live on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. Get rapid reaction to all the biggest moments of the Locked On Wolves postcast. Luke Inman's your host. Jack Borman is the regular guest, occasionally Tyler Metcalf, both of Kane Supis. So really, really good discussion following games immediately on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. And again, also on this very audio feed if you're listening wherever you listen to podcasts as well. All right. So what I want to do today, as I said, is kind of go back to the things we discussed the last couple of days, but put a little bit of a finer point on things and just kind of say like, okay, boil it down, right? Because we covered a lot. I talked through, I guess Thursday show, I did more of like, hey, here's what happened in each game type of a thing. So I'm going to kind of pull all these things together and give you the things I'm watching for most. Number one, who are the Timberwolves going to use to guard Jamal Murray? I think this is the biggest key to the series. If I had to just like pick one thing, it's how the Wolves managed to guard Jamal Murray. Now, Murray did not have a great first round series against the Lakers. Obviously at that game winner, that was nuts. And that's just kind of his MO now, right? Going back to the bubble is Jamal Murray's clutch. And I think sometimes we use the clutch label, whether it's playoffs or fourth quarter, crunch time, whatever, that gets overdone a bit because there's very few players that really can sustain a certain level of shooting in the clutch. If you go back and look at Kobe's clutch numbers, they're not that great because it's really hard to score in the NBA. It's really hard to score when everyone knows you're trying to score in the clutch, right? Everybody remembers the good moments and not so much the bad moments. However, there are some guys who, and Murray's sample still isn't like massive, with the injury, we're talking basically like 3-ish seasons with the Nuggets good and Murray good and crunch time moments, but he's consistently been good in those moments. If he's good throughout the game, I mean, the Wolves are really going to have their hands full. He's a really dynamic scorer, a really, really good player. And we didn't see a ton of him in the regular season this year. What did he have? I just lost my my stat here. I think he only played in 2 games against the Wolves this year, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to pull it up here. I guess I clicked off of it, but let's see. Yeah, Jamal Murray. Oh, he played in 3 games against the Wolves this year. That's right. It was just that 3rd game he missed. And he averaged 17 points on 44% shooting from the field. He did shoot 54% from outside the arc, and he got to the line only 3 times a game. And I talked about this the other day. The Nuggets actually don't get to the line all that often. It's really Joker, and that's kind of it. In terms of overall free throw rate, they were like bottom 5 in the league. And to me, that's a huge deal when it comes to the Wolves. They're actually bottom 3 in the league. That's a huge deal because, as we saw in the first round, Minnesota fouls a lot. And for the most part, we'd expect the playoff whistle to be a little bit more lenient. It wasn't necessarily for much of the first round against the Suns, and it worked out because the Suns also couldn't stop fouling. In this series, the Wolves should have an advantage there. It's really only Joker, and that should help the Wolves guard Jamal Murray. And it's one of the reasons why I think the Wolves will try some different things with Murray. Jaden McDaniels has struggled against him in a one-on-one matchup. I don't really know why. I mean, Murray's super athletic, but like, it's not like he's more athletic than Jaden McDaniels necessarily. Sometimes it just depends on the game, but Jaden sometimes doesn't move as quickly laterally and I know he's a top whatever perimeter defender, top 5 perimeter defender in the league. But whatever it is about that matchup, again, relatively small sample, but Jamal Murray's done well head-to-head against McDaniels. I think he'll probably start the games guarding Murray, but I think if he's on the floor with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, we'll probably see Nickeil Alexander-Walker guard Jamal Murray. I think that's probably where we end up here. And the Wolves have to use, and I'll say it again, he doesn't get to the line a ton, so it's really getting through screens on the perimeter and making sure he doesn't get uncontested 3-point looks. That's probably the biggest thing when it comes to the matchup. Now, Denver doesn't shoot a ton of threes either, but they're a really good 3-point shooting team. And Jamal Murray is almost 43%, 42.5% from outside the arc on the season. Like I said, over 50% against the Wolves across 3 games. So it's really going to be getting to him, getting through screens, getting a strong contest off, closing out to the touch if he's spotting up. That to me is the key. And I think we'll see Alexander Walker guarding him quite a bit. I don't know that we'll see as much of Ant guarding him. Again, not that foul trouble is a major concern against this team and specifically against Murray, but I think you take your chances with Edwards maybe guarding like MPJ at times, Michael Porter Jr. Now we might see McDaniels do that too, but Michael Porter Jr. I think Jamal Murray's the biggest factor. Michael Porter Jr. may end up deciding, goes a little bit to predictions that I'll get to later. I think he may end up being a deciding factor in a game in this series because he's kind of the other guy. Right. I mean, it's Murray and it's Jokic. And then Porter Jr., I don't want to say that like the Nuggets go how he goes, but he's a guy that the Wolves aren't probably going to expend a lot of energy trying to figure out how to stop him. But he scored 16 a game on 46-38 shooting splits this year against the Wolves. And he's going to be active on the glass, especially on the offensive glass. And I think Michael Porter Jr. is someone who, if the Wolves kind of rotate essentially Ant, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Jaden McDaniels between Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., I think more often than not, we might see McDaniels on Michael Porter Jr. and Alexander Walker on Murray if Ant's off the floor, and then Ant guarding Porter Jr. and McDaniels on Jamal Murray if Alexander Walker's off the floor. I think that's what we'll see. So I think the Wolves will open with Ant guarding Porter Jr. and McDaniels guarding Murray, but that could get flipped. That to me is the most interesting thing. Like, who's going to be able to stay in front of him, get through screens? And usually Alexander Walker's, the Wolves have multiple guys who are incredible at getting around screens, getting through screens. And the Nuggets, of course, just spam the pick and roll constantly and different, variations of pick and roll game. So that's going to be huge. I mean, Alexander Walker, again, is going to be really big. He's probably the best at the team at getting through screens. McDaniels as well. He's just a little bit bigger. So it sometimes is a little bit tougher. And Ant's pretty good at it. Conley's great at it, but again, doesn't have the size to contest as much on the perimeter. I want to talk more about Conley here in a little bit. So I think, to me, the biggest question is who's guarding Jamal Murray and how the Wolves manage that. And then on the flip side, which I would say is a related thing, who's guarding Anthony Edwards? I think it'll probably be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and in theory, he should be able to guard Ant. I talked about this extensively Thursday. He wasn't great against Ant this year in the regular season. Watching it back, Ant was able to be physical with him. Ant was able to take him into the post. Ant was able to shoot over him. He bully balled him a couple of times. And I know Caldwell Pope's a plus defender. I'm not denigrating Caldwell Pope at all. like, who is going to guard Ant, right? Like, most teams don't have a guy. Obviously, the Suns tried it with multiple guys at once and it didn't work. So this isn't a ripping on KCP situation. I just think that he doesn't, if they're going to try and do it one-on-one, they don't really have a shot of guarding Ant. And I think Ant's going to just go supernova a couple times in the series because I just don't know what the plan is. I think Aaron Gordon's their best chance to guard him. And I know he's not as quick laterally, but Ant's not going to bully ball Aaron Gordon. At least he shouldn't be able to. I mean, he did a couple times, but again, watching back in the regular season, I thought Gordon held up better against Ant because he stood his ground. He got up better contest because he's a little bit bigger than not a little bit, a lot bigger than KCP. So if I'm the Nuggets, I try Gordon on Ant and I'm just ready to bring help. And I put KCP on, I mean, I guess, I don't know. He is their best defender. It's not like the Wolves have another necessarily perimeter threat, but to score off the dribble, right? They're like Michael Porter Jr. is going to guard McDaniels. So all that to say, I think KCP guards Ant because otherwise you're not going to put him on a lower usage guy. I mean, Aaron Gordon's going to guard. Well, I guess Jokic will probably guard Towns, although we've seen them flip that too. So more likely than not, we'll see Jokic kind of quote unquote guard Rudy Gobert, and we'll see Aaron Gordon on Cat for stretches, and we'll see KCP on Ant. So that whole matchup thing is going to be really interesting. It's one of the reasons why the Wolves are actually a really good matchup, or the Nuggets, I should say, are a good matchup for the Wolves. Again, the Nuggets are incredible. The Wolves shouldn't want to play the Nuggets necessarily because they're great and rightfully favored in the series. But among all the teams, the Wolves match up with the Nuggets perhaps the best. Like, there aren't any other teams that can necessarily throw this much size at the Nuggets and physicality at the Nuggets and be good at some of the things the Nuggets aren't as good at. I want to talk a little bit more about the Wolves offense and then a couple other keys here, and then I'll get to predictions. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Lockdown Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. Yeah, I did. But there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, download it, now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? If you do, no doubt you have to turn down the volume because of all the shouting. Instead, make the switch to Lockdown Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Lockdown Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so we talked who's guarding Murray. We've talked who's guarding Ant. And in terms of the Wolves offense, in order to free up Ant and in order to have some success against the Nuggets, it really, what I think the Wolves need to do is actually run. So there's two things, actually. One I talked about on Thursday and Wednesday, I think, which is increase the frequency of running in transition. We know the Wolves, when they choose to run, are incredible in transition. They were top 3 in the league all season long in terms of transition points per possession. But they just don't run very often, especially off of defensive rebounds. And we'll talk about rebound in a second. Obviously, that's related, very closely related. But when the Wolves actually get out in transition, they're really, really good. For the season, Minnesota was, I should say, for the regular season, was 3rd in points per possession in transition, according to Clean the Glass. Frequency-wise, they were, I believe, 28th. Where'd we go here? I'm looking for the... Yeah, 3rd in points per play, 28th in frequency. I was right. So 3rd in points per play, 28th in frequency in transition. The Wolves were. Okay? and they were dead last in running off of live rebounds, which is not ideal. And I get it. Like the Wolves, they wanted to slow games down because their defense was so good. This is a little bit of a different animal. And against a team that is solid defensively, like Denver, it makes sense to try and get a few cheapies in transition. Now, Denver's transition defense is good. They're middle of the pack pretty much across the board. Off of steals, they're actually dead last in transition defense. And my guess is it's because a lot of those steals that opponents get against them is Jokic trying to push the ball, right? Push the pace. Jokic always likes to take advantage if somebody falls down on a rebound, which happens to the Wolves a lot, although less than it used to. Somebody's complaining to call. If he thinks they have numbers at all, something weird happens. Jokic is always just trying to fling the ball up the court. And it's a weird thing because when it works a fair amount, and part of it is just the magic of Joker, but they're also, again, dead last in points per play, points per possession, both of those in terms of transition defense off of steals, off of opponent steals. So the Wolves should have some opportunities there. Now, off of rebounds, the Nuggets do a good job of getting back. So, and I'm not saying this will happen more than a couple times a game, but the Wolves have to take advantage. If they get 2 of these steals in the open floor where Jokic or somebody else throws the ball away, they have to take advantage. You have to get cheapies as much as you can in the playoffs against a team like Denver. So I want the Wolves to run a little bit more. That's number one. Number two, when the Wolves found success in the regular season against Denver, it was when they were running really specific actions and not as much free-flowing, secondary break out of transition, not just straight pick and roll. When they were actually running, they ran a bunch of horn sets against Denver where they had different kinds of screening action. Cat only played in one game, so it was a lot of times Nas and Rudy, where one set in a down screen and then Ant curls around and then maybe there's a dribble handoff as part of that. Dribble handoffs, horn sets, any variation off of that to make the Nuggets love to switch. Across the board, they do, especially their bench unit. They switch as much as they can. So to try and increase the odds of a miscommunication for Denver, especially on the back end, maybe getting a lob to Rudy off or whatever. Now, if Michael Porter Jr. or Aaron Gordon happen, it's not usually going to be Aaron Gordon, but if Michael Porter Jr. is a low man, there's a little bit of rim protection there. There's a little bit of athleticism and size you got to worry about. But if you can confuse them, if Jamal Murray ends up as the low man or whatever, or if you just simply, again, create confusion, increase the odds of miscommunication for Denver, which that happens if you're running double drag screens or a horn set with some sort of additional action on the back end of it, that sort of thing. There were a couple other games where they did, I forget who shot the ball in the corner. I think it was McLaughlin actually, where the Wolves kind of flowed into just like a pin down for the corner, and the Nuggets weren't paying attention to Jordan McLaughlin, and he got a couple of wide open threes in the corner. I think it was one of the last 2 games against Denver. Just off ball actions, it does feel like Denver gets lost in the wash a little bit. And to be clear, they're a good defensive team, and that's why we're nitpicking here. It's the playoffs, right? Where are these little slivers of areas in which either team could take advantage of the other one? And I just think the more motion they're able to implement offensively, the more stuff they could do, the better that they'll end up. And even as simple as I know Ant's dribble handoff numbers weren't great this year, points per possession. It was not much over middle of the pack across the NBA, but getting Ant downhill is still the best proposition. And I should say he's also improved, right? So if you get him in a dribble handoff and the Nuggets are in rotation and they're a little bit discombobulated, then you play off of that, right? If they're in a drop, then Ant can attack the drop, get a runway, dunk over someone. If they're playing at the level or they're switching, there's going to be somebody open. And we've now seen Ant make that pass more often than not. So I really like the Wolves' chances to score frequently against this team, which is, again, a good defensive team, and the Wolves struggled offensively at times this year. But the way they played against Phoenix, knowing that Denver's a different animal, the way they played against Phoenix, some of that can be replicated. Even if Denver's not exactly loading up on the ball the same way that Phoenix did against Ant. And we talked about this, I think it was yesterday, a Thursday show. Ant in the regular season was really good against Denver, except for his 3-point shooting. 26 points per game, 48% from the floor, got to the line 7 times a game against Denver. So I really like the possibilities here because, again, they don't have an individual defender that can just stick with Ant all the time wherever he is on the floor. But horn sets, dribble handoffs, off-ball screens to try and free him up, all of the double drag screens, all of the above to just get the ball in Ants, just be a little bit creative. maybe, some of the Bulls actions from the 90s, right? I mean, as long as everyone's talking about it, some of those actions that the Bulls used to get the ball into Michael Jordan's hands, exactly that, right? Double drag screens was a common one. Things like that. I think that would behoove the Wolves to do that. My last kind of key here before I get into some predictions, rebounding. And that, like, it may seem really simple, and I know that I harped on this in the Phoenix series, and the Wolves ended up dominating Phoenix on the glass, which was a little bit unexpected. And I know that you would, just based on the rosters, expect the Wolves to dominate that, but they didn't against the Suns in the regular season. The Wolves lost the rebounding battle in 3 of 4 games against Denver in the regular season, and they lost the offensive rebounding battle in all 4 games. Denver is a good offensive rebounding team, or I should say a good overall rebounding team, but especially good on the offensive glass. Aaron Gordon's the one I worry the most about. Jokic is going to get his. He just does. Aaron Gordon is somebody that you got to put a body on, because otherwise he's going to create these extra possessions, and he's a good enough passer to make you pay, because he won't just, throw it back up at the rim. He's going to find an open shooter or a cutter off an offensive rebound. So I worry about Aaron Gordon. Whoever's guarding him, it's probably not McDaniels. I guess it's mostly going to be Rudy Gobert, because he's going to be playing that free safety role. Rudy has to, instead of just turning and rebounding, turn and find Aaron Gordon, put a body on him, a strong block out, not being called for fouls, not a sloppy block out, but like a real one, and go get boards, because I worry about Aaron Gordon on the offensive glass. And the Wolves were so good on the glass against Phoenix. I am concerned about some regression there. And I don't know, like, at the same time, and we'll talk about this in a minute here in the prediction segment, Minnesota was so good against Phoenix, and it wasn't simply because of the size advantage. It was because of what they did differently schematically. And I want to talk a little bit more about that next as part of the prediction segment, and why I actually feel okay about their chances rebounding the ball against Denver. A lot of it is how they responded in the Phoenix series to the challenge to rebound the basketball better. Obviously, that was a focus of Chris Finch and the coaching staff going into the Sun series. So we'll talk about that next. I'll have at least one really big, bold prediction, and then I'll give my prediction for the series. So all that is coming up here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, it's prediction time. Real quick. Accountability. Last playoff series, 2 weeks ago to the day, I believe, I gave some bold predictions about Wolves Suns. Number one was that Alexander Walker would have a 20-plus point game in a Wolves win. That corner three-pointers would be a huge part of the series, and specifically that Nah game. Game one of that series, Nah had 18, and the Timberwolves blew out the Suns because of that big third quarter. So that was a very close get on a prediction. He had 18 instead of 20. My second one was that Slow-Mo would be the odd man out at some point in the rotation. That, on a technicality, I was right, because he only played 5 minutes before getting hurt in game one. He was available in game two, officially available off the bench. They did not play him. I'm sure it was more because the Wolves decided to give him an extra day, and the way that game played out, they didn't need him. And he ended up playing a little bit like I said, he was going to play more 4 than 3 in that series, and he ended up, playing a part. So I'll give myself half credit on that. I thought the Wolves would lose in 7. I was wrong about that. I thought the Wolves would win games 1, 4, and 5. They won games 1 and 4, but we didn't need a 5. Those were kind of my predictions. So I did okay on that. Call it 1.5. I guess technically I didn't get the Alexander Walker one, but not bad, right? Here's my predictions in this one. Let's talk rebounding first, because that's where I closed the last segment. So the Wolves lost the glass battle in 3 of 4 regular season games. They lost on the offensive glass in all 4. I actually think the Wolves will flip the script rebounding-wise against the Nuggets unexpectedly over what they did in the regular season. And here's why. with the caveat that the Suns and Nuggets are very different teams. I have to keep saying that. I understand that. However, the Wolves are the same team they were in the first round. And if they're going to continue to corner crash on the offensive glass, which is a little bit dicier against a team like Denver, who, while they play slow, can play fast because Joker just occasionally decides to fling the ball down the court. Nuggets were bottom 5 in pace this year. So I think it's a calculated risk, but the Wolves may need to steal some possessions this way by crashing McDaniels from the corner. I talked about this frequently throughout the series, but McDaniels averaged in the first round playoff series, I believe he averaged like 2.5 offensive rebounds a game. I'm going to pull it up real quick. But that was a complete flip from what he did in the regular season. He averaged 3 offensive rebounds per game in the first round. McDaniels did. For the season, he was 0.8 offensive rebounds per game. In the season series against Denver, he was 0.8 offensive rebounds per game. Jaden McDaniels needs to keep doing that. He needs to keep getting on the glass. He needs to keep being aggressive, crashing from the corners. We saw Towns do some work on the offensive glass. We saw the guards. I mean, Conley, Edwards. The Wolves were really crashing the glass offensively. You don't want to get too deep. You don't want to have 4 guys below the free throw line and have Jokic just fling an outlet pass 3/4 court and have Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon dunking and shooting threes in transition. But if they're calculated about it, and again, crashing from the corners, if you're in the corner spotting up, and that's already a tough spot to get all the way back in transition. So depending on the angle of the shot, if the Wolves are coaching their guys to crash and to try and steal a possession, as McDaniels did often, McDaniels is the perfect guy to do it with his length, his athleticism, his size overall. I think that's going to be key in this series. I don't know if that's a permanent schematic change for Minnesota to do that, to have corner crashers and to send an extra guy to the glass. But it makes sense to me in this series. You're going to need the help against Jokic and Gordon and others on the glass, Porter Jr. So I think rebounding is going to be key, and I think the Wolves will surprise us. I'm not saying they're going to win every game rebounding-wise like they did against Phoenix. Denver's different. They're not going to win rebounding-wise every game. They're probably not going to win every game in the series either, right? But I think they should do well on the glass in the series. I think the schematic change is going to be key. My other prediction, I think Anthony Edwards is going to have a 50-point game in the series. I know 50-point playoff games are exceedingly rare. I think he does it. I don't think Denver can guard him consistently. I think he's extremely confident. I don't know that it's not going to be game 1. I think game 1 is going to be, both teams are going to be a little rusty, well rested, but rusty. So the recipe for that is a fast-paced, sloppy game. Like, we're going to see a lot of Joker throwing the ball away. We're going to see Ant throwing the ball away. Hopefully we don't see Cat offensive fouls, but I think everyone's going to be rusty for both teams, and they're going to be excited, amped up. We're going to see some sloppy play in the first game. I think it's probably like game 3, game 4, where we see Anthony Edwards go off, I'll call it 50 plus. That's more fun than saying 45. I think he's going to have a nutso game. I just don't think they can guard him. And I think he's playing well. He's confident. He's seen the floor extremely well. And he is that type of scorer where he could just go off. We know that. I think he has a 50-point game in the series. My last prediction is just going to be for the series. I actually think the Timberwolves win this series in 6 games. I do. And before you call me a homer, I picked the Suns to win the first series in 7. I was dead wrong about that. And it had to do more with the way that the Suns could score and the level of scoring talent on the Suns, and then the Wolves' potential issues offensively than anything else. But with the way the Wolves dispatched of a good Phoenix team, what were they, 46, 47 win team, the way they're playing now, their relative health and their confidence level, and the way Ant specifically is playing, and also their history of guarding the Nuggets, or I should say matching up against the Nuggets, and also guarding Jokic. We talked about this on Thursday, but Cat's been one of the best in the league at guarding Nikola Jokic. The physicality he plays with. For whatever reason, Joker does not get a ton of foul calls, although he did average 8 free throws per game against the Wolves this year. Remember, Cat only played against him once. A lot of that was against Naz Reid. And Naz has been okay against Jokic. I just think Cat is going to do a really good job on Joker, and provided he could stay relatively within himself as he was for roughly half of the Phoenix series, he could do that more often than not, which may be asking a lot, but who knows? I think the Wolves win this series. I think they win it in 6. I think the Wolves win game 1. I think they lose game 2 off of only 1 day rest at altitude. Nuggets aren't going to go down 2-0. I think they win game 1, lose game 2 on Monday night. And then I think they win both games at Target Center, 3 and 4, lose game 5 back in Denver, and then close it out in game 6. I know that it's Denver. I know they're the defending champs. I get it. But this team feels different. They feel different, and they match up well with Denver. They're confident about it. They're clearly confident in this matchup. I think Cat does a great job on Joker. I think they can't guard Ant. And the Wolves' depth is going to matter. We talked extensively about this earlier in the week, but to just kind of put a bow on this, Denver doesn't want to play their bench. They played their bench in the first round less than any other team did. And it's just not as good as the Wolves' bench. Like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Slow-Mo, Naz Reid, and then if you go deeper, which they're probably not going to with frequency, but Monte Morris, even Jordan McLaughlin, like those guys are better than what the Nuggets are throwing out there with their second unit. And I think they'll split the 2 in Denver. I do think they win game 1 and lose game 2. That's my guess. But the depth is going to matter because some of these games, like there's a big gap between games 2 and 3 next week. I think it's Monday and Friday. But besides that, I think it's like every other day the rest of the series. And that's going to favor Minnesota because of their depth. Now, the altitude going back to Denver, that could mess with both teams, but Denver should be able to acclimate more quickly. That will be difficult too. And I get that. And it's why I think Denver will win 2 of the 3 games they play at home. But I think Minnesota will hold home court in the series and win this thing in 6. That's my prediction. And I feel good about it. All right. That's all I have for you today. A reminder, after the game Saturday night, it's a 6 p.m. Central tip. As long as what I'm reading here is correct, I believe that's final. We'll be live on the postcast, Luke Inman with Jack Borman, probably, give or take around 9 p.m. Central on Saturday night on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. That audio will get posted right here to this feed. That'll be your weekend episode. I'll be back on Monday, putting a bow on, or I guess summarizing what happened in game 1, and then also leading you into game 2 on Monday night. I'll be back on Monday with that. Back daily, of course, next week, Monday through Friday. We're with you every single day. The postcast will be posted after every single game as well. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CK. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.